You're listening to the Cricket Podcast.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Cricket Podcast, where we've got three topics for you today. We've got test matches with India and Australia, which are hilarious, test matches with England and New Zealand, which involve the ball flying all over the place, and we have the Women's World Cup, which is going exactly as everyone has predicted. I am Max Brown. I'm joined by Ross Legg, who's fresh back from a work trip to Birmingham and expedited his return just to be here. How are you, Ross?
Yeah, I'm all right. I'm jettisoned in. Could you be jettisoned in or only jettisoned out?
I think you'd be jettisoned in. Why not?
Yeah, why not? I've been jettisoned in. I'm going to go with that
Parachuted in.
Yeah, I've been parachuted in.
Right, yeah.
Because Hopi has gone on a nice little surprise trip to Paris with his girlfriend. Rumours have it that he might be proposing.
Ooh.
So, yeah. I don't know who started those rumours, but it might have been just me a second ago. Max, we're also in esteemed company tonight.
We are. It's the return of one of our closest pod friends, Dan Weston, back from jet setting. He's also parachuted in. Literally, I heard. He won so much money in Vegas, he actually parachuted back to the UK. And he's with us today. How are you, Dan?
Yeah, I'm good, Max, but sadly it was a commercial jet. Unfortunately. I flew on Virgin Atlantic, but I do believe other brands of airplane are available.
They are. Some are better than others. Right. Well, good stuff. We might as well get into it. We'll start. Where do we want to start? Should we start with India and Australia?
Yep.
Things that's fresh in the mind.
I think so. We've released a couple of videos recently which have been just taking the mick really out of Australia, more than they've really taken the mick out of themselves. And it's working for us, Max. So I'm going to continue doing that, right?
Yeah, lean in.
So they are 2-0 down. And as we know, Australia are the kings of overreacting. Ever since Sandpapergate, as we all remember, Cameron Bancroft, Steve Smith, David Warner, they have lost all semblance of what a normal reaction is to something bad happening. Has been kind of if I was a PA consultant or a PR consultant, that's kind of what I'd be going at for. And I'm a little bit on the side of they're doing this again. They've gone to the toughest place to play in international cricket. They've tried to go in with a plan. Sure, it's not the right plan, but a plan nevertheless. They tried blaming everything else but those plans, like the pitch, the smog, the groundsman's wives, the molecular makeup of the grass outside off stump for the left-handers, and more. But ultimately, it boils down to 2 tests, and they're 2-0 down. I don't think it's as bad as all of the pundits and ex-players are making it out to be. Where do you guys sit on this fence? Complete aberration, 1 out of 10? Or do you know what? It's probably a 3 out of 10 or a 2 out of 10.
Such a vast range to choose from. Thanks, Ross. To be honest, after the first test, I think it was pretty bad. I mean, that was a 2 out of 10 performance. They got spanked, but they were well in the second test. Like you have to sort of compartmentalize that a little bit. I think for the first, well, it was only 3 days, wasn't it? So the first 2/3 of that test, barring that performance from Jadeja and Akshar Patel, or Ashwin and Akshar, the rear guard action, which got India's first innings up to where Australia had been, that was like 6-7 out of 10. They were doing well. They matched India. They had a 1-run lead, and they had the advantage of not batting fourth on a pitch that was turning quite considerably and showing some. It wasn't so much variable bounce as consistently ridiculously low bounce, and they were well in it. And then they completely lost the plot, and they had one session of 0 out of 10 cricket, which just blew my mind. I mean, they were playing on the same pitch as the one that, like, the night before they were 60 odd for 1, and then overnight it's like someone spiked their bedtime Ovaltine with some acid, and they just all had these crazy acid dreams where, like, what would be a really good idea? Let's just sweep everything. And they turned into sort of 1860s 13-year-olds from Victorian Britain, and went up the chimney. I don't know what they were doing. It was weird. because up to that point they'd done really well and they'd sort of fought their way back. Travis Head batted all right. Hanscom did what he's known for and played spin well, and it was all looking like suddenly we might have a series on our hands. But well,
we don't anymore, do we? Dan, where do you think this has gone wrong? Because I've got a selection of quotes here from Ian Healy, Ian Chappell, Michael Clark, etc. But you're the real expert compared to some of these ex-players. So where do you think this has gone wrong for Australia?
I think there's a few factors that we can discuss, and maybe they're all small contributing reasons as to why that there might be some problems for Australia. I think ultimately I agree with Max though in terms of your grading sessions and your grading sort of segments of matches, and 65 for 1 in the second innings, having a slender first innings lead of just the one run. They're in good shape, They set 250 and you think they'll be favourites. You set 200 and you think even they're well in the game. Yeah. And then they lose 48, 9 for 48, I should say. And it all went very wrong. I think the sweep options obviously are being discussed a lot in the media, and I also heard Jack talk a lot about them the other day on the pod. And he was talking about the success rate of sweeps based on speeds of the bowlers, and I think that's a really relevant point. And I think maybe the analytics-wise, that's something that they might need to look at a little bit, if they haven't done that already. But you would assume that they haven't because of the fact that the batters have all gone out and played that way.
It felt to me they just had this sort of understanding that the best way to play any sort of spin bowling is to sweep it, and therefore we should try and do that all the time.
That's what I'm saying. Yeah. Rather than having like more of a nuanced point of view, or nuanced game plan, if you like. And I think that also it's kind of prudence to suggest that there's still could be a bit of an overreaction here among a lot of the ex-players from Australia, because India away is a tough place to go. India away on a ranked turner when you've got Ashwin and Jadeja and back up from Akshar Patel to face is a Herculean task really to get a lot out of it. And I still think that some of these ex-players from Australia, they're very bitter about the Justin Langer departure, and they're looking to sharpen their knives wherever it's possible. Having said that, I look at this Australia group and I think it's very, very close to going stale. You've got a lot of players in their early to late 30s. And that requires some form of an overhaul, at least some evolution in the short term, and perhaps a revolution in the long term. Even they're bringing in for this series Peter Hanscom, and he turns 32 in a couple of months' time, and
new kid on the block. He's a rising star.
Yeah,
he's got at least 9 years left in his career at that rate.
Well, I don't know. I watched him play for Middlesex for 2 years, so I'm not quite sure. But in all seriousness, I think that is a problem for Australia. A lot of people now are saying, David Warner is a big problem in terms of that high reputation, big name that's now getting older and not performing. And that now he's obviously out of the series as well with the take your pick of concussion and the broken elbow. And I think both him and Usman Khawaja are 36 now. So they're not forward-looking selections, no matter whether they're the best two players or not. I'm not convinced about the current version of Warner. I've said that for quite a long time in various formats now. So that's another issue. I also was confused. I'm confused a little bit, not so much in this match because they picked 3 spinners, but in the first match they picked 2 spinners who are both off spinners, and India have got 1 left-hander in the top 7. So they're not picking players for the matchup. Presumably they're picking Todd Murphy because Todd Murphy looks to be pretty good. And they're picking Gary Lyon, Gaz, as because he's the name, and you can't do that. You have to go like more horses for courses, and even if you perceive a Kuhneman or a Swepson or an Adam Zampa or someone like that to be inferior to those other 2 spinners, you have to look at the matchups, because I would be pretty confident in saying that I would expect left arm orthodox or a leg spinner to average less against a right hander than a right arm offie. So that's no matter the quality. So that's something that they've got to consider, and it looks a bit unbalanced when you've got two spinners are, as you said, Max, basically the same.
And they've sort of ended up with a fairly long tail as well, haven't they? I mean, that's partly down to injuries, and Cameron Green and Mitch Stark are both slated to be available for the third test, which will pose them some more selection headaches, I think. But I mean, that's been a key difference as far as I can tell as well, particularly in the previous test, of basically once you've got rid of Alex Carey and Pat Cummins, that's that finished. That's that done. And India have got like people who can bat to 9, like actually bat.
Yeah, even Shami's improved his batting actually.
Yeah, and they're missing obviously the world class all rounder Jasprit Bumrah from that from that list as well. But I mean it's interesting. It's not often you find it that way around. You always feel that it's the Aussies who have the tail wagging. But interesting to see the shoe on the other foot.
Perhaps when you look at the makeup of the India team and you have a Jadeja at 6, so you've got a frontline bowling option in the top 6.
Yeah.
Which Australia don't have. They might say, well, hell, we haven't got Cameron Green, but you can't budget on having Cameron Green in the team because he's traditionally, over the course of his career, has had a lot of injuries. And it's just like England saying, okay, well, we've got like Jofra Archer, Mark Wood, and Chris Wokes on his stone. Well, the chances of them all being on the same pitch at the same time are pretty low, and we've seen that over the number of years. So you got to have a backup plan, And I question as well the need to have those two offies when you've got Travis Head who can bowl some serviceable off spin as well if the matchups are available as well.
So obviously they didn't go with Travis Head in the first test, which I guess sort of further illustrates the questionable choices that were made.
Well, not just the questionable choices. I think there seems to be some communication of he's not picked because he's not very good against spin. I mean, like, I'm not quite sure how that's going to set him up for a successful match when he does play, because you need to have faith in you, right? I don't know who communicates this stuff, but you have to have people to believe in you, and I
can't imagine there's a huge body of evidence to to suggest whether or not Travis Head's good against spin in the subcontinent either. He might have played there a handful of times and not done very well, but he wouldn't be the first elite batter to have done that. So he's going to get a chance now, isn't he? He's going to get to open.
Yeah, this also assumes that people don't actually try to work on some of that stuff. Like if in our Discord channel earlier, people were talking about Rahul Dravid and where he first started playing spin, and actually found that he was getting out LBW quite a lot because he was trying to play with the traditional place, and then went back, reworked his game against spin, and as we know, famously kind of sent the letter to Kevin Peterson on how do you play spin in India, and it kind of that frustrates me a little bit when it comes to Travis Head doesn't have the best batting average in India. Well, they've not played actually that much cricket there fundamentally. Dan, from what you've said there, we've got issues with selection, we've got issues with the game plan, and we've got issues in terms of how they were kind of analysing how they were going to win that game. So not just the overall game plan itself, but actually the whole approach to the way in which they've set up to go on this tour of India.
Yeah.
So if we go into the world of where the podcast likes to go, right? Where we love
down a rabbit hole,
because I thoroughly enjoy where a culture is blame everyone and call for resignations. And this was never bad in my day. This is a disgrace. Every drop of bile, every word of condescension, it's all energy for me to do this podcast forever. And I would like to go into there and just share with you a couple of snippets I've pulled out. So Andrew McDonald, the coach, the people's coach, who replaced Langer. Dan, I really like your point about this. There's still some Justin Langer's my mate kind of bits in here, like twisting the old knife in. There's definitely that to it. But I think he's under a pretty big amount of scrutiny. But he talked about there being perceived pressure created by the spin destroyers. Were we clear on the plan that we wanted to play them? Yes. Did we go away from that plan? Yes. Did we fail going away from that plan that we had planned? Yes. Ian Healy then gave a tutorial dressed up as a very questionable PE teacher in how to sweep the ball, which if you haven't checked it out, please do. Michael DiVenuto, the batting coach, it's pretty obvious where we went wrong. With batting, it's a pretty similar analogy. You've got to swim between the flags in this country. If you go outside the flags in your game plan, you're going to get in trouble.
What?
That's not. I mean, if that's the advice that he's giving the Australian batsmen,
that's just
no
a list
wonder
of
they're all at
words.
fucking sea.
Well, I mean, looking at that, listen to what you're saying here, Ross. I mean, that quote from DiVenuto is as close as a cricket quote that I've heard to Eric Cantona's seagulls following the trawler. But I do kind of take the sentiment of it. And I definitely also take the points that Andrew McDonald's making as well. I know Andrew McDonald. I worked with him before. He's a very smart guy, and I would imagine that the Australian preparation for this tour has been extremely thorough. For me, there's no doubt about that. Knowing people who are involved in this setup, but it strikes me based on those quotes is that the players have been handed a game plan to combat the Indian spin threat, and they've gone off piste. That's how it seems to me, right? So I'm saying that maybe it's more of something that you can level, a fault that you can level with the players rather than the management group in this particular position.
Yeah, and Dan, actually, you've kind of come on to my point actually on this bit is that you've got a load of people gearing up on you have to blame someone. Ultimately, the 11 people who go out to play are the people who can kind of adopt it, right? And you saw, like, it was a shocker that day. Like the evening before, the ball was bouncing because it was the new ball. They made the most of it. They got themselves a decent run and got themselves into a really good position. And if they would have just not batted to survive, but had gone, do you know what? We're going to do this in tens, just like kind of you check, just like Ashwin and Akshar did. Do it in tens, like eat the elephant in small chunks. But here, it just they floundered a little bit. My favourite quote from all of this is Michael Clarke. If you haven't seen Michael Clarke recently, go and find the recent picture of him and enjoy it as much as I did. He goes, I'm not saying don't sweep in India. I'm saying the opposite. I'm saying you sweep at the right time, at the right stage of your innings, on the right pitch, and genuinely with the spin. That as insight is not very useful insight as far as I'm concerned. But Michael Clarke is positioning himself as an expert on Fox cricket.
I guess his point there is just what Australia didn't do any of that, isn't it? It's not so much that this is advice on how you play. It was more highlighting the fact that they did it all. I mean, Alex Carey He's been bowled behind his legs 3 times.
3 times, yeah.
This was the worst. Obviously, this one was the pick of the bunch because he didn't even play down the right line. It was so premeditated, it hurts. But they lost the plot, didn't they? I think I'm not sure how much more you can analyze it in some ways, in the sense that they just kind of went a bit mad.
Yeah, I think as Dan said, they've had an approach to it. Maybe that's been the wrong approach. Maybe it's the right approach, but they've gone off piste. I'm enjoying that. It's definitely ski season as well, isn't it? So let's say that
making up tactics on the hoof, not often a great plan. Do you think they've got a chance though of at least winning one from the signs of the 2/3 of that test with Cameron Green and Stark potentially back, a bit of something different, a bit of a bit of a longer batting lineup? Could they spring a shock?
I've watched, a lot of cricket, obviously, and I would be a fool to write Australia off in the last 2 matches, even in these current circumstances. Any team which has got Steve Smith and Marnus Labuschagne in it is a capable team of winning a match of cricket, a 5-day match of cricket. The team looks a lot more balanced if Green comes in for, say, a Renshaw or something like that, and Stark perhaps will come in. I don't know. Maybe one of the spinners. I don't know. I mean, like I say, I think it's overkill having 2 offies when you got Travis Head who can bowl at offies as well. There's definitely some scope for changes, and obviously we know Warner's not going to play as well. So
I don't think that's a huge loss so
no, I don't think
based on what I've seen so far.
I don't think it is either. And so, look, there's still some positive elements I think that Australia can take from this. It's going to be bloody difficult, but they've got a chance.
Mhm.
And then obviously we've got a big summer afterwards as well.
We have indeed.
Not sure Glenn McGrath's going to be predicting 5-0 this time.
Yeah, who knows? So Swepson apparently is being flown back out to India. So that's he might well play instead of Kuhneman, I'm guessing. If there's no point really flying him back out, really, is there? But
wouldn't be the first time.
To be fair, the carbon footprint of Cricket Australia for this tour has been pretty significant, if I'm perfectly honest. The squad planning, Dan, as much as you say they've got some smart guys going on behind the scenes, their squad planning on childbirths. They should have been handing out contraception kind of 9 months ago. Be like, we don't want anyone pregnant for the India tour.
It's just one giant antenatal class.
Yeah, exactly. So, Dan, predictions for these next 2 Test matches? I think they're going to get trounced 4-0. Is my view.
Look, I've just said that they've got a chance, but I still think they're going to lose 4-0. I mean, that's. I know that sounds a bit contradictory, but
no, it doesn't. No, they'll be competitive. You're saying they'll be competitive, but
I think they've got. Yeah, they're gonna. If they play 9 out of 10, 10 out of 10, they can win a match.
Mm-hmm.
But I think that also illustrates the Herculean task, like I said earlier, of winning away in India.
Well, I'm going to swim outside the flags in true Devenuto style, and I'm gonna say it'll be 3-1. I reckon they'll nick one.
All right. Well, let's talk about. We're
going to take a quick break, Ross.
Oh, okay, fine.
Take a quick break, and then we will come back to New Zealand, England.
Yeah, that sounds good to me.
You're listening to the Cricket Podcast.